Oh, Mark, I think you're muted.
Good morning, everybody. This is the morning meeting. Thank you for joining. Appreciate you being part of this. Let's get right to it. The president today has one thing on his schedule before he heads to Florida. He's getting his annual physical, after which his doctor will not be made available, as far as we know, to answer questions. We'll be curious to see what they say about the president's health. If you'd like me to predict, I'll predict that there'll be a press release that says he's in extraordinary health. And then he leaves for Florida. There is, however, a 1 p.m. Caroline Leavitt briefing at the White House, which will be quite lively. Don't know what the vice president's doing. Cabinet secretaries are on the Sunday shows. As I read the roster, a bunch of advisors, including cabinet secretaries, are on, but not Scott Bessent. But all the other folks who normally talk about tariffs are out and about. Congress has gone on their 2-week recess. Um, uh, Administration officials continue to be out explaining the president's policies. Show you two. First, here is Kevin Hassett last night, 105, with Sean.
What did we get this week as a country? Why are we better off than we were on Monday here now towards the end of the week?
We're better off, way better off right now than we were on the 20th of January. Let's look at the economic data. We've had two magnificent jobs reports. The jobs reports were incredible. 10,000 automobile jobs, a big increase in manufacturing jobs, big increase in every kind of job. The market thought there'd be about 150,000 jobs created. It was almost 230,000 in the last jobs report. And then what happens is they have this old thing called the Phillips curve, right, where it says that if you have job growth, then that causes inflation. And so while we've got this amazing job growth from President Trump's policy, we got a big reduction in inflation. So we've got people going back to work, increasing the supply of labor, increasing the supply of products. We've got firms, bringing trillions of dollars of investment back into the U.S. That increases the supply of stuff. And when you increase the supply of stuff, so suppose you got an apple tree and then you get another apple tree. And so now you've got an apple farm with 2 apple trees. Well, when you go to the market, you got a lot more apples, but you're going to have to lower the price if you want to sell all the apples. And that's what's going on. We got a lot more apples and people are lowering the prices.
The reality is, jobs report beat expectations. The CPI report beat expectations. PPI report beat expectations. You can cherry pick and find some negative data too, but the president's supporters have plenty to point to say things are going pretty well on the economy. But there's also the fact that China is now retaliated again. Chairman Xi says he is not scared of President Trump or the United States. And there is a great deal of unhappiness regarding particularly a trade war with China. Here is the U.S. Trade Representative, Mr. Greer, this morning on Fox.
We need to diversify from China and be able to source from other countries. And so I'm obviously sensitive to the needs of households and what we're seeing, but we've been put in a position and a point of emergency, frankly, where if we can only maintain our standard of living by being dependent on China, who is a strategic adversary, that's a very dangerous position to be in. And so we need to accelerate this.
What did you learn from the phase 1 deal last time, which they didn't keep to, and it wasn't enforced? Does that make you worry about cutting any deal with China in the long run?
Well, my sense is that the Chinese are pragmatic. I learned to have a deep respect for them. They're very serious. They understand power and realpolitik in the international arena. When we did the phase 1 deal in the first couple of years, where the Trump administration was still there, we actually were able to enforce it. They bought more ag products from us in 2020 and then even 2021 than they had done in history. So it is a matter of enforcement. And I think if there's mutual understanding, mutual respect, and a real agreement, you can actually move the ball forward.
So after yesterday's losses, futures are pointing up to 25 minutes away from the open here. Overseas markets mixed. Lots of questions about the dollar. We're not going to start with the economics, though, guys. Start with the politics and the red hot anger that remains, even with the president's reversal, from the financial community, from Europe, from elite columnists like George Will. Peggy Noonan says the establishment won this week, and it's great to see the establishment. Sean, how much does Donald Trump care about what the establishment thinks about his trade policy, and how much should he care? 0 for the both. How much he cares and how much he should care? Both 0.
I mean, I don't know that. So how much does he care? Probably, well, actually a little higher than 0, because I think some of these folks probably are, cross over into Mar-a-Lago a little. So he probably does care. I mean, just in terms of how wealthy some of these folks are. And they've been, some of them, not everybody's been opposed to him. So I would say that there are some people that kind of in a concentric, or what does Kalma like to say, in a Venn diagram, that cross over into that world. So there's probably some people that he cares about. But most of these people are the same people who have been consistently wrong since Donald Trump entered the stage. I don't know how many that he really cares about or should care about either. They're the same people whose wisdom has gotten us into a lot of this mess with China, with our debt. And I think he knows that his base, it's almost radioactive. If you say that some of these people support X, fill in the blank, the immediate visceral reaction is good, then let's oppose it. So I think to some degree, if he was going out there getting praise from Peggy Noonan and George Will, it would probably cause the MAGA faithful to be a little concerned.
Dan.
I think he does care a little bit about what the establishment thinks because he's always wanted to be accepted by them. He's always wanted praise. That's why he still calls the New York Times proactively to chew in their ear, because he still harbors dreams that someday they'll heap praise on him. I think he should. I mean, I think Sean makes some good points that the establishment is not always right. They're super defensive of the existing order because it has worked for them for the last, 40 or 50 years. I think where they're worth listening to is on the economy. I keep going back to this. When you say that we need to make all these changes, it's because 30-40% of this country has been harmed by trade, but 60 to 65% has not. And so when everyone says the market spoke this week, it almost is like the majority of the country has spoken. Like we are not willing to take serious pain in your kind of chaotic efforts to try to right wrongs for the other part of this country when we don't really see a plan.
Yeah, I think that the key word there, Dan, is plan.
Yep.
I think where this administration would benefit both in the macro and the micro is if they said, look, here's where we are. We're $37 trillion in debt. We have a $2 trillion a year deficit. And China owns our IP. They steal our IP. They do tech transfers. They are basically they are our enemy. And we need to be straight up about what that threat looks like and how we're going to address it. And we need shared sacrifice or something. But there needs to be a rally cry to understanding what the goal is. And that's what I think is missing right now, is that we're not doing it for the sake of doing it. We're doing it because we need to strengthen our country and prevent adversaries from finding an opportunity to come after us.
I think the lesson of the week in terms of the establishment, and if you haven't read Peggy's column, I recommend it to you. I think the establishment proved it's stronger than MAGA thinks or wants it to be, but it's still not as strong as it thinks it is. And the president has a pretty free hand here, but he reined back. But he continues the trade war with China, and I don't see any signs of that ending. We'll get China in a second. On the bilateral deals, Dan, there's no such thing as one bilateral deal of this significance done in 90 days. They're trying to build a process, Susie Wiles and Treasury, Commerce, USDR. They're trying to organize a process by which they could do more than maybe 100 bilateral deals, maybe not to finality, but to a shape where after 90 days they could say there's an agreement in principle. The Wall Street Journal and Politico both have pieces today casting doubt from the experts, saying it's impossible to do that.
But Mark, I will say this. I read those stories, and as someone who actually spent 3 years at USTR dealing with these, there's a difference between an FTA, which is a free trade agreement, or a bilateral deal like a Doha or a TPP, than reducing tariff schedules. That's not a trade. I mean, that is a completely, and they are misleading the American public as to what's actually happening. And so I as much as the Brit that's running Politico's playbook now has zero trade experience, the idea that aside from maybe visiting a duty free, the idea that these people have any clue what it takes to make a trade deal is somewhat laughable.
Well, but are you saying that in the 90 days there'll be no non-tariff issues addressed?
No, I do think on the non-tariff barrier issues, there can be some agreement because it's very specific. Like it's here's what And I mean, for example, in the EU case, I don't think you're going to resolve GMOs or the VAT, but those are much. I mean, you can take down. There are some very basic things that prevent market access in places like India and some Southeast Asian countries that you could easily say, if you get rid of this, we're taking our tariff down. Remember, this isn't a bilateral trade agreement, is them wanting to seek further access in our market, us wanting to do this.
Yeah.
This is us saying you need to take yours down.
Right. So if Susie, hold on one second. I just want to ask Sean one more question. If Susie Wiles asked you for advice, how would you organize this? Would you basically give Scott Besson a list and Lutnick a list and Greer a list?
They probably have the list. I mean, it's not hard.
No, but I mean, in terms of dividing up the work, like who's at the table with the other countries?
Well, I mean, I think part of this is you want sort of unanimity when it comes to what is it that we're asking from each country. It's sort of like, we want you to take your tariff down, your overall tariff down.
I'm asking you
Hold on,
a much more quotidian question. How do you organize 70 plus negotiations?
No, but that's exactly what I'm answering you, is that part of this is to have an agreement on as to what we're doing, and then you can farm it out. But if you can't have Lutnick out there saying, okay, I'll cut a deal on your non-tariff barriers and you can go halfway on your tariff, there has to be agreement as to what it is the goal is, and then basically empower. I think USTR's got to be in the lead on this, but Treasury's going to take a big lead, and then maybe throw a little to Commerce. But part of this, more than anything, you can't have three people cutting different deals. There has to be an agreement as to what the process looks like, so that what the number one goal is to take the tariff rate down. The number two goal is, in some of these countries, not all non-tariff barriers are created equal. And that's the problem, is that emission standards, GMO access, things like that, are very different than a lot of these other smaller, even customs can be a huge barrier to entry in some of these countries where they delay. And if you're talking about fresh fruit or something like that, sitting in a customs warehouse for 90 days is death.
Dan.
So I worked on trade with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce on the Panama, Colombia, and South Korea free trade agreements 13 years ago. I think the challenge is...
I'm sorry, hold on just a minute. While Dan's talking, put up CNBC because Jamie Dimon's talking. Go ahead, Dan.
Sure. I think what they're going to do is simple stuff. And I think, to Sean's point, they're going to have to go into this declaring what is like the one headline that we want for each trade deal. Because the problem is, and this is why I bring up the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, I sat there with ag and pharma and tech and Caterpillar, the airlines, the banks, the insurance companies. Everyone's got their issues in these trade deals with each specific country or block, depending on how they do this. That's why these things take so long, because we have all of our industry and all of our companies that have their issues, and so does your counterpart. And they have their domestic politics and their, hot button issues. And working that through a system takes time. So I think, and this is why I said this yesterday, they'll be very simple. I think they'll seek one headline. The problem is they are going to piss off all the losers because they don't have the time, the bandwidth, or I think, frankly, right now, the balls to go through this with every industry in every country.
The global elites have moved their anger towards the Trump administration and questioning its competence from the overall high tariffs, many of which were now suspended, to China. And the global elites are saying that this is a poor plan, that it's not going to achieve any U.S. goals. Wall Street Journal editorial page, finance Twitter is saying this is going to create a huge problem for the world economy. Dan, what cards does the president have to play against Chairman Xi, who says he's not afraid?
Well, just as we are reliant on their debt and their manufacturing, they are reliant on, for employment, all the companies that have the manufacturing and the footprint in China. And so, and they're also fearful of us encircling them in their region, which I go back to the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the military alliances we have in the region. So I think the number one thing for the Chinese Communist government is stability. That is above all else what they crave. So if they start having real economic pain in China, the leadership is going to become terrified of an uprising. So we do have some cards. It's just they have an equal amount of cards to play against us, to inflict pain on us.
Sean.
I mean, I kind of agree with Dan. I mean, they hold a lot. China holds a lot of cards in terms of debt, but they also can't have. I mean, they need us too for a lot of other things. So I think it's, and they also got to be careful. Oh well, I don't know how much now, but I mean, they like the more that we don't get a deal, and there's an attempt to create some kind of alliance against China, that hurts their long term viability. And I think that they've got to be careful they don't overplay their hand right now.
Well, and that's just the total irony of all of this is, again, if you wanted to really have, and I agree with Sean, there is bipartisan agreement in this country to tackle China. You would go to the country and say, we're going to cut free trade deals with Vietnam and Japan and South Korea, and we're going to encircle the Chinese. We're going to embed them into our economy. We're going to put, troops around them as we have right now. You'd go to the Europeans, you'd go to others to say, this is our mission. We are going to confront and kind of wrestle stuff away from China. Instead, we're punching people in the face and saying, you owe us and we're going to right every wrong with you. And we want you to help us with China. And the Chinese are going around saying, we'll build bridges. We'll make investments in your country. Like, what can we do to kiss your ass to be with us against them? Maybe it'll work, but it's hard.
Just as this country is not monolithic, China is not monolithic. And there are what the vice president would call peasants there who are freaked out by this and want it to be solved. And there are people there business people and workers who are saying, fight, we'll fight the United States and win. They're divided too. They probably have more in both camps because they have way more people than we do. But it's going to be curious to see how this progresses, because there are rumors, and Sean raised the prospect of a summit. There are rumors, just as there's been rumors for months during the transition that the president was secretly talking to Putin. There are rumors that he secretly talked to Xi. I don't know that that's true, but there's a notion, and you see this in the president's public rhetoric, that maybe he'll strike a deal with China this year, rather than having all of 2025 be about confrontation with China.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in this summit happening over there sometime late June, early July. Although we have this, I know this sounds silly, but there's a big military parade that's going to happen in DC for the 250th. That sort of, there's a lot of plan. But I think so somewhere maybe post that window. But they want to have some kind of big pomp and circumstance kind of thing.
All right. Let's talk about the Democrats. There's an argument that the best frame against President Trump, because it applies not just to tariffs but to DOGE, Social Security, Bobby Kennedy, is chaos. That Trump is about too much chaos, and that's not good for America's working families. Of course, Jeb Bush called Trump the chaos candidate. The notion that the chaos frame is the best frame to go against Trump has been around now for a decade. Dan, are you a fan of the chaos frame?
Yes, I am, because Trump barely won in 16. He barely lost in 20, and he barely won in 24, and he got wiped out in 18 and 22. It was less ideal for them in the midterms. Swing voters voted for him in just particularly 24 because they thought that he would lower inflation and be a better steward of the economy, period. DEI immigration was not unimportant, but it wasn't the lead. This stuff is not what they signed up for. They did not sign up for the government being just bulldozed and reoriented. They did not sign up for a, all-out trade war with every country in the world and told this is a little bit of pain that you're going to deal with for a long-term solution. They were not told any of this. So I think if you're talking about winning elections, I think it's a good thing. We're going to have an alternative. I don't think it'll just be good enough to say he stinks. But I do think if you just look at the data and you looked at it in 20 over COVID, chaos around COVID hit people.
Sean, if you were the press secretary and you walked into the Oval and said, Mr. President, the Democrats are coming after you because they say you represent chaos, what would he say?
He'd say good. A couple things on this. One, I think chaos is baked in a little. If you are waking up to the idea that Donald Trump is a little chaotic from time to time, then I hope that rock didn't hurt you that you've been sleeping under for the last 10 years. Two is he's not running again. And I think this is him. The second term is really him feeling unencumbered and free to make a lot of big decisions about the direction of the country, what he wants to do. And that's a very freeing thing for a politician. And then three, results matter. And we are here in April of an off year. And Trump has put a lot of political capital on the line. And if he is wrong, like all politicians, I think he'll pay the price. But if he is spectacularly right, this is where I think he will win. I mean, there's enough time where, even for all this bedwetting that happened at the beginning of the week, I looked under my 401k again last night, and I was like, okay, we're back. It was a little rough Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but we're back. And I think in 60, 90 days, if we have achieved great things for the American people, and this president turns around and says, I did it, I got this from China, I doubt whatever. And I mean, look, Dan's right. He generally gets to define what success looks like. But if there are demonstrable points on the board where he's gained market access or greater share or whatever, then I think this is going to be he will benefit from that. And that's the one thing that everyone always bets against Trump. And what I've learned over the last 8 years is that usually doesn't go well.
The only thing I'll say, though, is for everything you just said, Sean, there was enough chaos around Doge that they realized they needed to reel Elon in a little bit. So they leaked the stories that, he's going to be leaving. And we can debate whether that was the grand plan all along, but somehow they made sure to emphasize this point to the public. And the market spoke this week. And again, Trump says the quiet part out loud. Everyone got a little nervous, including the president, right? His hands started shaking on the putting green. Wasn't everyone else's, it was his, because it was his political future he was staring at. So the idea that he's got the kahunas and he's tough, the chaos message, not from us, but from the real, Main Street, is hitting him. So I actually think I give him credit. He's made course corrections.
Well, I'll give you credit. That was probably the best. The hand shaking on the putting green. I think I may, just for the record, I mean,
the yips, that's where it comes from. It's Masters weekend. Come on.
Yeah, no. But I'm, as you know, you give credit once, and then by the time you use it again the second time, you can say it was yours.
One thing I loved yesterday is the president put out a statement about the Masters and just like how much he loves the Masters. I
was wondering, by the way, if he was going to go to it.
Maybe he will. There's a vacuum right now. We've talked about how the congressional Democratic leaders are not necessarily filling it, and so the speculation about 2028 has been pretty big already. Just in the last couple of days, America's leading Democratic political analyst last night spoke about this. Let's play. Where am I here? Let's play 103, please, and then 104 back to back.
So, look, if somebody traded on insider information, they should be held accountable, just as people here on Wall Street are. But I think it's a little rich for certain members of Congress to say stuff.
All right, Dan, the Democrats should listen to Dan. All right, watch the show, listen to Dan. You might survive. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jesse.
Kamala thinks California would be a cakewalk, but insiders say it could be the final nail in her coffin.
If she ran for
insiders,
she'd lose. It is so bad when you start to read how horrible of a candidate she was. She couldn't run for anything and win.
If her friends are being honest with her, they're going to say what Dan said, which is you can run for governor of California, but you might lose. And that would be not just embarrassing, but like existential destabilizing.
Remember, Joe didn't pick Kamala as his running mate?
All right, Dan, what else did you say on Jesse last night, Dan?
All right, I want to say for the record, I said I thought the Democrats have had the best 3 weeks since Harris got the nomination, because I'm going to segue here. People like Andy Beshear have been out and delivering just an excellent message on trade. He's been talking about bourbon sales overseas and auto companies in his state. I mean,
all right. Speaking of Andy Beshear, he has followed the trailblazing path of California Governor Gavin Newsom and launched his own podcast. here, 106, here's a piece of his new podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Andy Bashir podcast. This is our pilot and first episode. The world feels pretty heavy right now. The news comes at you and hits you minute by minute by minute. It can be stressful and it can feel overwhelming. Our goal here is to process a lot of that information and news, but in a conversation between friends.
So everybody's going to have their own review of that. He got a nice piece in NBCnews.com about launching his podcast. Gretchen Whitmer was hammered by NBC along the lines of what we talked about yesterday. So again, there's a lot of discussion about who's stepping up. And as we've said, this is not premature, not just because of the vacuum, but pretty soon you're going to see candidates out there raising money for 2026 congressional candidates and gubernatorial candidates.
Can I just one critique there, by the way?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The one thing about long form that I've learned, in terms of podcasts and everything else, is that there's plenty, like the ecosystem has a lot of opportunities, right? It's like any other profession to some degree. If you're going to get into podcasting, one of the things that I think a lot of people learn is that there's a degree of authenticity that people want. They want to feel like it's not like you're not reading off a teleprompter. And I saw that for the first time now when you played that. And I felt like it was watching a friggin' AI robot. Like, good to see you. Today I will talk to my friends and they will tell me great. That doesn't sell. And if you like, this is the problem, is that somebody looks down a list and says, you know what we should do? We should do a podcast. And I will sit in a suit where I will take the tie off and look really relaxed. And then
Earth tones.
It literally looks like.
I agree, Sean. And if you watch more of it, you won't have a change feeling. You will say that thing that, Gavin Newsom's has taken a lot of criticism, and I still don't understand the politics of what he's done. But his is authentic. His is truly organic. This thing is not organic.
I get asked all the time at speeches and events about Trump, and people say, the one thing is that, love him or hate him, he is who he is. He is privately the same guy he is in publicly. He says the stuff that he says. He is real. And I always point to the fact, because people try to think that somehow I'm going to emulate Donald Trump. And my point to them is, you need to be you. Rick Schneider, the former governor of Michigan, his Twitter handle was one tough nerd, right? He embraced who he was, which is a really smart technocrat. And it was his brand, and he sold it. He didn't try to be hip and cool. And when these guys are like, I will put an earth tone jacket on and take my top, it's like, dude, you don't look like a human.
Correct. All right. So
these guys, my only point going forward to 2028 is they think that somehow it's the venue and the platform, not them. And 100%. That's where they miss it.
I totally agree. All right. So stipulate. We're all about to say who we think the three most likely Democratic nominees are in 2028. Stipulate. It's a snapshot in time. We can change our mind. I want to be clear. We're running down some folks. We'll give them all a chance. If they can grow into it, we'll be fascinated to watch. But at the same time, as I said yesterday, none of these people are ready for this stage. None of them are currently ready. And most people who win nominations are ready by this point in the cycle. So you can say, let's give them another year. Dan said yesterday, Barack Obama got way better in 2008 than he was in 2007. So you can improve, but you got to look at where they're starting from. And I still believe that most of these people who are talked about are starting from a place that is not high enough to compete for this type of thing. So with that having been said, we'll give them all a chance, but we have to be honest about what we think. Dan, who are the three most likely nominees today?
I also want to just say, Sean, that's the second time that you interrupted and took my lines talking about, I was going to say the same thing about Bashir and just how kind of stilted he looked. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to do three. I'm going to say this is for in the primary, because you got to win the primary to get
for the nomination. Three most likely nominees.
Well, no, but okay. So to get the nomination, which is to win the primary. My first one is going to be Bashir, and that is I'm going to put him in the moderate lane, head down. He is stilted. He is like conservative. He's not going to light a room on fire. That could be to his advantage when you have the entertaining, chaos machine on the other side. Sometimes the country says we want the opposite of what we have. So I'm going to put him as one in the moderate lane. Shapiro has got, I'm just going to say this, I question being Jewish, whether the country will go with that. This is just raw politics. I'm going to put J.B. Pritzker in the progressive lane. He's a white male with a couple $1 billion. I think he'll put money behind it. He is unafraid to say things. I don't agree with some of what he says, but I will put him over like Cory Booker. And I don't think AOC makes the jump yet. So I'm going to put
AOC's not old enough, right?
no, she would be. This is the first cycle where she would be old enough to run.
All right.
I just don't think she's going to do it.
All
so
right.
I'm going to put JB in the progressive.
So Pritzker, Bashir, and Shapiro. Sean.
No. Polis, I'm going to put in the libertarian wing by himself. And
wait. I'm sorry. So your three are.
I'm trying to write this down.
Your three are Bashir, Shapiro, and Polis.
No, Bashir, JB Pritzker, and Polis. I was pulling a Sean. You asked for a sentence.
So not Shapiro. Not Shapiro.
No, not Shapiro yet.
Okay, Sean.
Can I ask a serious question? And this is pleased because you brought up
peace, love, and understanding.
No, but you brought up Shapiro and his Jewish faith, and look, I kind of think that bridge is crossed. Maybe I'm naive on that with Lieberman and others, but okay. Do you think that someone of Bashir's physical stature, or whatever you want to call it, like size, has a better shot with his appearance than Shapiro does on his faith?
So remember those states you're going to have to go to first. South Carolina.
You don't know. You don't know what the order is. You have no idea what the order of the primaries is.
Okay.
You have no idea.
I'm going to assume that you're going to have to. Well, okay.
Assume away.
Okay. Well, I got to start somewhere, right? So someone's going to go up front. They're going to be a handful of states.
Yeah.
Were it to be South Carolina, Iowa, Nevada, I question Shapiro's appeal in some of those pockets, and I think being a little dull may work to his advantage.
Okay, Sean.
So wait, hold on, but I just want to be clear. Do you think let me ask it this way, because I'm genuinely intrigued. Do you think his faith is more of a deterrent than Pritzker's weight?
Apparently, he does.
Again, there's going to be a moderate lane. There's going to be a progressive lane. If you're going to go in a Democratic primary, being Jewish, look, they're going to ask him about the Middle East. They're going to ask him about this stuff. Like, I think that is going to, again, raw politics.
Yeah, Bernie's Jewish, and he does very well.
Would have been the nominee. Would have been the nominee if they hadn't cheated.
Right. It was a very, but
he's less religious.
Bernie spoke up in defense of the Palestinians.
Right.
Ad nauseum. I don't think Josh.
All right. We got to move. Sean, who are your three?
My three. I think that it is. I think Shapiro, Buttigieg, and Whitmer.
Shapiro, Buttigieg, and Whitmer. Okay. The correct answer. Just kidding. Shapiro. Number one. Number two is Polis or Michael Bennett. So I've got a Colorado slot. It's one or the other.
Bennett.
It's one or the other, either the current or next governor of Colorado. And then last, which I'm surprised neither of you said, is Gavin Newsom. All right, we got to go real quick because we want to get. If you want to get in the conversation, please raise your hand. Sean, give me all at once: winner of the week, loser of the week, and what you're looking for this weekend.
So I was going to go with. This is where I wish Dan would go first and steal mine. So I was going to default to the Russian. I'm going to have some fun. It's Friday, so you know who my winner of the week is? Ralph Macchio. Ralph Macchio, Danielson officially got his black belt. And so I felt like, you know what? I'm just having some fun. If it's going to be political, I think the winner of the week is the Russian ballerina that was returned. My loser of the week is AOC. If you're going to fly to a Bernie Sanders event and talk about progressivism and populism, don't fly in first class. Pro tip.
What are you looking for this weekend?
Well, normally I would say truths, but the Masters is going to be happening. I actually think this might be a weekend where I don't know that there's that much to see. I normally anyway. I'm actually looking for anything because I'm grasping at straws this weekend to see something because I think the president will keep a rather. You will see probably more truths about the Masters than you will about the trade deals.
Dan.
The winners were the markets, the bond and equities markets that moved Trump. The loser was Peter Navarro. He may not be on the outs, but he got a little public flagging, I thought, and didn't have too many people defending him. And I'm watching China this weekend in their attempt to try to rally the world and see if they can get allies.
Winner, Scott Bessent. Loser, Peter Navarro. What to watch for the Iran?
I'll give you the winner. Yeah,
Wait,
the Iran nuclear talks.
Oh, that's right. That's Saturday.
I think if you're Scott and his team, by the way, I give you that. I think that he has had a really good week, and I think there's a lot of people who would agree with that. I mean, he's done it in such a low key style. It's very un-Washington what Scott Bessent has done, and I think that it's smart. He's clearly got a very smart way. And again, I just will say how he's working with Trump has been really, really good.
Masterful. He figured out how to work with Trump, which usually takes people a lot longer. Jeremiah, welcome in. Thank you for joining. Tell folks who don't know where you are and what is on your mind.
Hey guys, I am in Champaign, Illinois. Been watching pretty much actually since day one. Heard you from Smirkanish, Mark, and been watching since day one.
Thank you.
Kind of sad that this is the first time I've called in. I do video for politics, work in the independent world through the years, and wanted to kind of chime in with some fun, video thoughts, Mark, when you had some critiques of the Trump campaign's videos here and there, but I've always held off. But there's been one topic that I just have seen in the news in the past 24 hours that has really kind of horrified me, and just with the absolute deluge of just so much stuff in the news that I just don't hear anybody talking about it. Would love to hear your guys' thoughts, especially Sean's. And that is just the whole thing with Trump going after Chris Krebs. Maybe you guys talked about it yesterday.
Yeah.
I wasn't.
No,
really
we
catch
did.
yesterday.
We didn't. What I said yesterday was we didn't make time to talk about it. It's a very important topic, and we just chose not to because there's so much going on. But keep going.
Yeah, it's just, man. As somebody who has voted for the conservative candidates for the vast majority of my life, this is the kind of stuff that just absolutely just gets me actually like pretty riled up and all this stuff. And I understandably, I totally understand why you guys weren't able to talk about it because of just everything else going on. But if anything else, like Sean, just talk me off the ledge. Tell me why this is a big
Jeremiah,
deal.
just be a little bit more specific about why it bothers you so much.
And also, can I add, are you equally concerned about Miles Taylor or just Chris Krebs?
Yeah, so I'm concerned about both of them. The Miles Taylor one, though, I guess if I'm trying to put myself in Trump's shoes, could understand that one, I guess, a little bit, because he was leaking some things and that kind of stuff. But the Chris Krebs one is the one that really is, because from my view, he was just somebody who was working in the government, just doing his job.
So these are two people who worked in the first administration who are now being targeted by executive orders for potential investigation, potential indictment. But Jeremiah, explain why the Krebs thing bothers you so much. I'm sure it's obvious to some, but I just want to hear it in your own words why it's so troubling to you.
Yeah, because from everything, I mean, because I remember back, in 2020 when he was, when Trump was saying, this election is being stolen, it's being rigged, that Krebs wasn't like bashing Trump in public. He wasn't going out and leaking stuff. He was just a person who was working in the government, doing his job, and just trying to like do his part and saying, to the rest of the public, hey, I'm just, I can just assure you this was not rigged. This was safe. This was everything else. And Trump going after him 5 years later or whatever it is just seems purely just because Trump is, in my opinion, a sore loser and just can't admit that he lost.
Did you vote for Trump?
I did not. No.
Okay. Sean, thank you for that. Sean, can you defend it or explain it away or agree with Jeremiah?
Well, I mean, I think obviously the president has a lot of, what do you want to call them? Grudges, rights that he wants to wrong, whatever. I'm intrigued by this only because I don't know that was top of mind for Donald Trump. I wonder how much someone, pushed that. The Miles Taylor one, I agree with you. That's a little different. What he abused his government position. On Chris's thing, and again, I can't say I follow it entirely, but just to put this in context, Chris was the director of the Cyber Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA. And where I will critique him a little, again, there's a difference between critique and retribution, is he is not an election expert. And to talk about somehow he using him as a cyber guy and saying somehow he had the authority to go out and talk about election safety is just patently false. He was not an election expert. We don't run our elections off the internet the way that, so he was trying to purport himself to be an expert on something that he is not. And for that, I would critique him. I think obviously somebody believes that or is ginning up the president. And if you look at the EOs, the executive orders on between Krebs and Taylor, there is a distinction between the two in terms of what he's seeking in each. And I'd have to go back and look at them side by side. But the Miles Taylor one was very specific, and you brought this up, Jeremiah, about potential leaks of information and abusing his government privilege. I believe, and I could be wrong because I read it when it came out. The Krebs one seemed more about just taking away his security clearance and things like that, which, again, you got that because of the United States government. So it seemed, and like I said, I apologize if I forgot when I read him. I wasn't prepared for the question, but I think his there was a difference in how the approach to Krebs was than Miles Taylor.
Dan.
I think it's horrific. I think history will be a really harsh judge of this stuff. Like I'm willing to say where I think Trump has it right and is the establishment is missing it. I think this is one of those where there's just so much terror of him that people won't speak up. But going after law firms like this, going after individuals like this is horrific. It's un-American. And I hope history, because I don't think people today are going to I hope history holds him accountable.
And look, I will say this as somebody who is I forgot the legal verbiage here, but not a target of the Mueller investigation, but had to sit through hours and hours and pay lawyers and paralegals and their lawyers. I wish any of you folks that are now criticizing President Trump had 1 ounce of concern when all of this was going in and sucking up people to testify in front of Congress, to go through Mueller, racking up thousands and thousands of dollars of bills on a friggin' witch hunt. So I appreciate all the critique of President Trump, but I really wish that there had been one voice, during the entire time that Mueller was racking in everybody and congressional hearings were calling everybody up for folly. Those things aren't cheap. They waste a lot of time. They suck up a lot of money. And everybody who wants to express sympathy now was absolutely silent and sat on their hands while that was all going on.
Just as Republicans were silent when my friends in the Clinton administration who didn't have a lot of money, had to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on legal bills. This
Benghazi investigation.
This practice of saying there's nothing to criticize about what Donald Trump's doing because Democrats did it too is not the way the country should work. They both should be criticized. And anyone in government with the capacity to create legal bills for a private citizen should think twice before they do it. It's just not fair. But it's equally unfair when Republicans do it as Democrats do it. And I hope that people exercise, whatever party they're in, the discretion. And that's true of the congressional investigators too. You have to take into account the lives you will ruin, not just the reputations and fortunes, but literally the careers and ability to function in society of people who are targeted gratuitously for investigation, or in this case by executive order. All right, Jeremiah, thank you. Grateful to you for coming on. Thank you for the very thoughtful question. All right, Mr. Wells, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are and what's on your mind. And thank you for being part of Two Way.
Good morning, everyone. Gentlemen, first time being called on. I started, Mark, following you guys back in October. You guys popped up on my YouTube. I remember you being on Bloomberg and a couple other the other media outlets. I just want to talk about tariffs. I'll start out with I'm from Florida. I'm still a registered Democrat. However, that changed in 2016 when the DNC imposed superdelegates, which just completely changed my thought on the Democratic Party, how they can segregate that from the people, and that just drove me away. However, I still have some of those values, but I'm more conservative now. I want to talk about tariffs because I worked in aerospace and in the DoD and civil world for a majority of my career in supply chain. And I'll give you guys a perfect example. with one of the companies I worked for, they made very important panels that go in aircraft cockpits. And U.S. company, small business, amazing hardware they do. Certified in both Boeing and aerospace. However, to sell for Airbus to sell our panel, they charged an additional 2,500 to 5,000 euros to put in that panel and their cockpit on their planes. And that is a huge um, monetarily hurt that company, because they could have good paying jobs here in South Florida, manufacturing, which is very hard to come by. But that imposed tariff by Airbus to protect, local European countries or companies is huge. And I don't think a lot of people understand the effect on that. Mark, you just came back from Italy. I was in Italy. My wife and I were over there for an anniversary trip last month. I mean, you don't see any U.S. cars. And some people might, drag me through the calls on this because, Italy's got great wine, but you see no American wine over there. And Napa and Sonoma produce some great wine. It's a little high end, and trust me, the low end in Italy wine is phenomenal.
You lost me when you said we should all go to Italy and drink American wine, but keep going.
Well, no, we shouldn't drink American wine, but you can't find it. You can't find American wine.
Well, there's a reason.
You shouldn't even be. I get you on the cars. But you shouldn't be looking. You shouldn't even be looking for American wine.
I'm with
Mark on this one. Listen, I'm with Mark on this. I'll get the cars in, the beef, all the other ag product. Yeah. I'm not really sure that it's a market access issue.
I want a JP Morgan Chase on every block in Milan. All good, but not wine. You're making great points. Do you want to ask a question, or you want us to just comment on something besides the wine?
Just comment, because I think what's going on in our country is very fascinating, and I really appreciate you all coming together with this platform. My wife is Venezuelan, but she's a doctor. And what blows my mind is, she's very liberal, but this year she even voted for Trump. It's so I have the immigrant in the family that's nationalized, but what we're seeing in this country is very interesting, and is worthy of you guys having this platform.
All right, thank you for that. Thank you for coming on. Dan, comments besides on the wine?
I was going to say, someone there said Americans should sell box wine in Italy, which I found pretty good. Is your wife concerned? Like, is her support for Trump still strong?
It's not really strong, Dan. It's just it was a better choice. She thought Harris was just a wallpaper.
Is she still or is she still satisfied, or whatever?
No. But I'll take that back. We paid our taxes last week, and she was very upset, very for Doge, but that will waver in 10 minutes. She'll go back to more progressive views.
Unless Trump raises her taxes pretty soon.
Yeah. Correct.
Yes.
Sean?
I think part of this this is like a lot of issues where, I mean, you mentioned the Airbus. I mean, I was at USTR for 3 years. That literally case just made lawyers rich, right? The Airbus Boeing case. And I think there is a bit of this is what makes trade complicated, is that there's a little bit of how do we protect our own, say that we're for competition, but also, I mean, so there's a little bit of issue there, and Airbus is a massively subsidized product of the EU, to be blunt about it. And this is what makes it concerning, is that we're a little guilty too of some of the things that we do for our stuff, protecting certain industries and companies. In the case of the airlines, it's obviously Boeing is our preferred company for obvious reasons, and so there is a little bit of complicated nature to this in terms of what we do as a country, and hopefully some of this exposes some of this, gets people to understand a little bit more about what's happening, and also the gives the president some leverage to fight for additional market access, but it is complicated and it's not easy because they're going to protect their stuff. We're going to protect ours. You just saw the other day, what was the new strike fighter? The president handed it right off to Boeing. Of course, I mean, there was really not going to be or Lockheed, I guess. But there wasn't going to be, I mean, Airbus was going to make a fight for it. And there's certain things we do too. So,
All right. Anton, thank you. Grateful to you for coming on. Thank you for being part of two-way. Markets so far are kind of mixed, a little bit up. Bond market, all years are up as well right now. So far, we'll see. All right. Michael, welcome in. Thank you for coming. I'm going to unmute you. Michael, pardon me if I'm forgetting, but have you been on two-way before?
No, this is actually pretty amazing.
All right. Well, we're
I
grateful.
watch a lot, but you just caught me off guard.
All right. Grateful. This is 3 for 3, all new people this week, or this episode. Thank you, all new people. And again, we love new folks coming on. Michael, thank you. Tell folks who don't know where you are and what's on your mind.
I'm from lovely Syracuse, New York. It's about 30 degrees today, but yeah, so what's on my mind is just watching the events unfold with the stock market and stuff. It makes me wonder, like, at what point can a president do something that he thinks is right? Like, whether or not the stock market thinks it's right, the president can't do anything without the stock market approving of it. So I'm just kind of curious, like, watching everyone freak out because Trump wanted to do something he said he was going to do. Does the stock market always have to approve for that to be something that stays?
Great question. Great question.
I think, sorry.
Go ahead, Dan.
Look, I think the thing to remember is the stock market is the indices are full of companies all over the world, but a lot of United States-based companies. And Wall Street analyzes those companies and analyzes events and tries to forecast, is something going to help a company make more money? That's their fiduciary, or hurt a company, right? And then they place their bets. So it's not that there's like this cabal of people saying, screw Trump. Let's, it is, how can we make money for our investors, for ourselves? What do we think the impact will be? And so they are canaries in the coal mine. They're not always right, but in the long run, the market usually is right to say, this is our bet. We are putting money, not just BS, but with our position. So I think with Trump, one, he did not say he was going to do all this. He didn't.
You're right. No, you're right.
And that's part of the problem is they're scrambling to model and gauge impact. And the last thing I'll just say is when there is so much uncertainty as an investor, often the best thing to do is nothing. Pull your money out. Because you get both of those.
Well, look, I guess to your answer, Michael, I mean, the stock market does. I mean, if you look at the last few days, it's gone up some days, it's gone bad. The gold market's gone great. If you're interested in gold, go to bishopgold.com. Tell them that Sean sent you. But I will say that, like, part of it was, I think like a lot of Americans, I was looking at my portfolio, all my retirement accounts on Monday. It was like, okay. Then I looked at it again yesterday. There are, dumb bits and pieces. And then obviously the bond market was a big factor, and the president and Scott Bessent were talking about that. So there's a lot of factors, but I will tell you that generally speaking, in my experience, most politicians don't sort of go, I'm going to make decisions because of where the market is today or now. It's sort of, that's the bouncing ball is where are things going in the future, not where are they. And the stock market is sort of a lagging indicator.
I guess it kind of just freaked me out because it seemed like the reaction was based on the market. And I'm like, well, at what point should the market just be president? Because if everyone's, again, I'm watching the media getting probably overhyped on that, but I look at my 401k and get nervous about it. But I was just thinking, like, does the president actually have power if he can't do anything without, the market freaking out and then everyone, of course, which is understandable. Don't get me wrong.
Michael, can I ask, when you say without freaking out, like the president's actions do stuff. So if he does something that the markets react positively, then he'll, it'll go up.
Keep doing it.
So I don't know that it's like he looks at it and says, gosh, I just did something. I got to correct it now. The market reacts to policy generally or perceived policy.
Yeah. Michael, thank you for coming on. Grateful to you.
Thank you
Appreciate
very
it.
much.
Appreciate it. 3 new people, which is excellent. And since it's spring, it's time, ladies and gentlemen, for a farm update. Brian,
Hey.
nice to see you. Thanks for coming
what's
on.
going on,
Give everybody
guys?
a Chapin Road farm update. What's the latest in the soil and around the farm?
Well, we got snow this morning, which was the latest I've seen it here. But the first season that happened was maple syrup season.
Ooh.
Just wrapped up. That went really well. I've got jars of syrup for all you guys.
Are you
Amazing.
selling syrup? Are you? Can people go and buy it from you?
Not that's we're gonna start selling it next season. The syrup for this year we're gonna use at farm dinners and stuff like that. For the farm and gifts for people and stuff like that. But it was my first year making maple syrup. It was it's an awesome
Brian,
process.
I'm excited.
Is it FDA approved?
That's I'm not sure. That's why we're not selling it.
All right. But you'll let us taste it.
Yeah.
What are like the activities planned for May?
May stuff's gonna start going in the ground. I'll flip the camera so you can see the field back here. But yeah, we're gonna start planting. We're gonna be mostly doing a lot of aromatics, a lot of herbs for aromatherapy programs. We're gonna make aromatherapy tackle boxes. Those we will be selling. Yeah, we're just we're putting together the board right now. There's a lot to setting up a nonprofit. So that's the biggest thing we're working on right now is setting up the 501c3.
Whatever it is,
it's called. Yeah,
three would be good. And if people want to read more.
Have you thought about a super PAC to like a super PAC that would?
Yeah, that's the next phase. Next phase.
Yeah. As an extreme independent, that is the party I would.
Okay.
And Brian, if people want to read about the farm, where can they go? Instagram.
I would still at Chapin Road Farm on Instagram, and then chapinroadfarm.com is the website. We're going to be putting stuff up with that. But yeah,
awesome.
Brian, aside from the syrup, just know that I am a bit of royalty when it comes to swag. I call myself a swag king. I love t-shirts, hats, sweatshirts, mugs, probably
coffee mugs. Yeah.
So when you get ready for the swag, let me know.
Yeah, that's another thing that's coming this year. We're going to do hoodies and stuff like that for the farm.
Right. What about a quarter zip? Have you thought about a quarter zip?
A quarter, yeah, like because we are all golfers here, so yeah, we should do some golf swag for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Brian, the only thing I'll say is you told us it snowed and then you showed us the field and I saw no snow.
It melted, but it was.
I'm like Ellery Queen. Brian, great to see you, man. Thank you for the update.
Good to see you two guys.
Right, take care. Dan, what are you doing this weekend?
I will be watching the Masters and I am going to be on with Laura Ingraham this evening.
Amazing. Sean, what do you have on tonight?
We have the authors of Fight, Amy Parnas and Jonathan Allen. I mentioned this yesterday. I know Megan had this the other day. I got an early copy of this, and I was so ready. I told them, when you grade stuff on like the internet, like people look for stars. When I read a book, it's about how many dog years. And it was like one compelling story after another. They've written Lucky and Shattered. I thought both of those books were excellent. This one takes the cake. If you are a political junkie, and again, obviously, I don't even have like an Amazon code, for goodness sake. Like it's a great book and it's very insightful as far as what the thinking was. And so I have like literally 2 pages of questions for these guys. And I'm excited because I love, I will read any political book, and I loved how they wrote it, how they framed it, their sourcing on it. So anyway, I'm excited.
Don't miss that. And then at 6:00, last two-way of the week, barring breaking news, former Ohio Governor John Kasich, one of my favorite people I've ever covered. He's got a new book out called Heaven Help Us. We'll talk about that in all the day's news. Curious to see his views on tariffs and Team Trump and Vivek Ramaswamy, and everything else. So join me at 6 o'clock tonight.
Ask him about,
yeah.
right, Mark. I want to know also, like, where like the whole like lieutenant governor thing is sort of fascinating, how that's all going to play out.
Yeah, we will talk about that. I will promise you, whenever I talk to John Kasich in public or private, there's a lot of goofball behavior. I'm not saying by whom, but there'll be goofball behavior. So if you enjoy a two-way with goofball behavior, you won't want to miss it. 6 o'clock Eastern time tonight, or available on YouTube all weekend long. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Loved having 3 new folks on this episode, and we'll see you Monday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern time. Have a great weekend.
Great weekend.